Appreciate you coming. We'll wait 10 seconds for Amy to come in the door, and there she is. Yay! I'm Chris Mucher. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees in Miami Township, and I want to take 1 second to welcome you all to this little slice of heaven that we call Miami Township. Please enjoy your stay, and I hope it will be fruitful. With that, Judy, I will give it to you for official.
All right, thanks very much. I'm going to go ahead and roll call in members of council. Brian House.
I am here.
Thank you. Kevin Stokes.
Here.
Mary Ann McQueen.
Here.
Also present with us is village manager Josue Salmon.
For the township, all 3 trustees are present. And who's doing this? Okay, I guess I'll
go ahead, Jay.
roll call.
Let's do it.
Vieri Rios.
Here.
Okay. Hempling.
Here.
Magnus.
Here.
Turner.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay.
Back to Judy.
Well, we've got an agenda, and if you want to just roll right into it, it shows school board starting off with the presentation, just to sort of set the tone and give out basic information. That's followed by Miami Township's presentation, followed by council's presentation. So the school board's ready.
Before we start, we can just do some housekeeping items. All your microphones are on. So if you see a green light in front of you, that means that sound is being broadcasted YouTube, Facebook, and Channel 5. If you're having a sidebar conversation, just hit that button right there, and that means the. Not that I'm encouraging
In other words, don't say anything you don't want
Oh,
anyone to
and
hear.
just one other thing that is probably helpful, because I don't know how well the camera will pick up nameplates. If you do speak, not a bad idea to just go ahead and identify yourself when we're doing so, in case someone's viewing and can't see the nameplate. It doesn't see yet. Thank you.
Judy, do we need any type of overall introduction to why we're all here?
That is a fantastic idea, Kevin. Go.
Well, I'm going to sit in Brian's seat. So as most of us know, I'm Kevin. Thank you very much. I'm Kevin Stokes, Vice President of Council. Just briefly, I mean, I think we all understand the need for at least the taxing agencies to have a healthy relationship, a collaborative relationship. And I'm speaking on behalf of Brian, but I believe he maybe started talking to Judith, and then maybe Marilyn got involved. And that was, I think, the impetus, those early on discussions were the impetus for creating a venue where we could come together, share our individual expectations, mutual expectations, look for opportunities for collaboration and cooperation, because what one entity does severely, positively or negatively impacts the others. So this is Las Vegas. You know, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. So we want you to be free and open to share your various perspectives and expectations. And so there's not a whole lot else to say other than that we don't anticipate this being the only time we come together, because there are some current issues before us, and it'll take a little work, I think, for all of us to sort of clear our hearts and minds, if you will, and to get to that point where we can operate in as collaborative a fashion as possible. So for Judith and Marilyn, feel free to add on to that if you'd like. But I think, again, that sort of at least sets the beginning of the framework for how we got here. And I think what happens today will dictate where we end up. All right, anyone else want to add to that?
I guess I'm Judith Hempling, school board. I just want to point out that joint projects that have been really positive for the community, for example, the broadband that the schools and the village work together on. And that there are places where we have responsibilities together around certain kinds of issues. For example, Safe Routes to School really is a project of the village, but obviously very positive impact on the schools. This summer, there was discussion about our drop-off at Mills Lawn because there's been some difficulties, and of course the streets are a responsibility of the village, but around the school, when there's drop-off, there's these responsibilities that overlap, and to the extent that we're working together on those things, we're bringing a lot of positive to the community, I think.
I'll just take a second just to thank everybody for making the time. I know it's, I'm TJ Turner, the president of the school board. I think it was my letter was one of the motivating factors to getting us together, and I just appreciate it. I think we have found as a school board that we can't over communicate things, and so I think having a forum where all three entities are together at once makes it a little bit easier for the public. But I just think it's a great idea, and I appreciate everybody taking the time to be here.
Great.
And for hosting.
You're very welcome. Thank you anytime.
There's a presentation that the school board provided, and we can share it here on the screen.
I'm not hearing you.
The school board has provided a presentation, and I can put it up on the screen, and we're going to put it up here and share the screen so that the viewers also have access.
Ready? Good evening, Terry Holden, Superintendent of Yellow Springs Schools. The treasurer, Jay McGrath, and I will be doing this presentation. So I just want to lay out two pieces of data for you. One is about our student enrollment, and we are a K-12 educational institution, and we are about children. So if you can go to the next slide, there you go. So I've just given you the past 5 years in terms of history, and you'll see our total enrollment, our resident enrollment, and our open enrollment. Open enrollment, honestly, is pretty static. It's about the same every year. Our resident enrollment actually generally is that way, there's one exception, and that is in 2021. And if you recall, we were virtual almost the entire year, and we lost students because of it. However, we've recovered. So that's a very quick snapshot into our students. Next slide is about our employees. At this year, the 22-23 school year, the district has 95 full-time employees. Our annual payroll is $6,233,000 and change, and then roughly taxes paid to the village of Yellow Springs by Yellow Springs employees is 81. All employees. Excuse me. All employees, and we do have contracted employees in the district. 81,000, and then just under 1/3 of our staff resides in the school district, which could be the village or the township.
Okay. My name is Jacob McGrath, and I'm the treasurer of Yellow Springs Schools. One of the things we just wanted to outline tonight, and I think was one of the purposes of the meeting, was getting out ahead of things and letting the public know what are some of the things that are coming up. And for us, this is a list of our expiring levies. I don't know if I want to do the
Yeah. So what you have here is a general list, and then we're going to pop them out on the subsequent slides.
Yeah, so I'll just start by saying there's a challenge to school funding that happens everywhere in the state of Ohio, and it goes back to the 1970s when they passed House Bill 920. And the way that House Bill 920 works is that as property values go up, the effective millage rate that property taxes were levied at go down. So if you look at not the last column for revenue, but the two columns next to it, you see the voted millage, and then I have the residential average effective rate. And that is why the effective rate is lower than the voted millages. As property values go up, the revenue remains the same, so the effective millage goes down. So as time goes by, your taxpayers don't pay more money for the same levies. It actually, the millage just drops to make sure that we're maintaining the same funding. So when people say, oh, you just passed the levy, why are you asking for more? We really, most of the time, schools do not get the inflation growth from property values. So the way that schools get more money is by going back to the taxpayers. You want to go ahead to the next slide? The first levy that's expiring is our permanent improvement levy. These are funds that can only be used for improvements that you anticipate to last 5 years or more. And that can be renewed as early as this November, but we have not done the steps to do that. And in order to keep it, it will have to be renewed by November of 2023. Otherwise, that will fall off. It currently, it permanently collects around $150,000 a year. And you can see that the voted millage of 1.2 has fallen to 0.86. The next two levies, you'll see that they're together. Now, one of the things that can be a little bit frustrating is the name of these, emergency. That's the name of the levy. It does not mean that we are in a state of emergency and that we are desperate for funds. That's just the name that the legislators gave this type of levy. They are voted at a dollar amount, and they are always designed to collect the same dollar amount. So you'll see, again, that the voted millage is higher than what people are paying now. So every year you should pay the same dollar amount, or roughly the same dollar amount in taxes, but the millage goes down as property values go up. These were, when these were renewed, because these were on before, they did some timing so that they both expired at once, and that gives an opportunity to combine them or substitute them. And so that, you're not renewing both, two levies. You can do it in one fell swoop if they expire at the same time. So that's why that was done that way.
And those expire, the renewal date for those are 20.
So they expire in, 2025. Now, normally, we would be able to renew them as early as November of 24, but you'll see that we can renew them as early as March of 2024, and that's because that's an election year. So this was
presidential election.
Yeah, a presidential election year. Because they're going to do the preliminary stuff in March, there's an extra opportunity to run a levy. So that is some updated information. We could go as early as March 24 to renew or substitute or combine these. And then the last levy that expires is a bond levy. there's no renewal because we'll be paying off that bond. This goes back to the improvements that were done in the early 2000s.
2002.
And this will fall off then. So there is, at this time, nothing to renew, but it's just something that would drop off. Okay, so this slide is to give taxpayers and villagers and the other entities sort of a snapshot and comparison of what makes Yellow Springs a little bit different from some of the surrounding school districts. So you can see it has our total assessed valuation. How much would 1 mil in property taxes raise? And then I also have the percentage of residential and industrial or commercial properties within the district. And just for a comparison, since we're close, we use Beaver Creek schools to give you an idea. So one of the challenges for Yellow Springs schools is that 1 mil is not equal everywhere you go. And 1 mil for us is $170,000, which really, it doesn't buy too much these days. 1 mil for Beaver Creek schools is over 2.1 million. So even if we run the same levy, we're getting, like 10% of what Beaver Creek would. One of the other unique things about Yellow Springs is that the residential and agricultural properties make up 90% of our assessed values. Beaver Creek, you can see, is 76% and about 23% commercial. Now, I have not looked over the entire state, but I will tell you, I've looked at a couple other schools, and most schools do have more of the percentages like Beaver Creek, about 75% residential and about 25% commercial. Of course, it depends. There are rural schools, so of course, rural schools that have more agriculture are going to see more up in the agricultural residential. But most city schools you see with that 75-25% break. So what that means is that homeowners and residents in Yellow Springs do share a larger burden of the tax base compared to a lot of school districts. So when taxes go on, it does hit our homeowners a little bit harder than it does everywhere else.
So, and this is specifically property tax, right?
This is only property tax.
Right. So this would, to increase this, there would have to be commercial, so a higher percentage of commercial property.
This is a snapshot that illustrates a discussion that's been going on in the village for a while about the lack of development. So we just wanted to highlight for you, we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but
Right.
you're right, highlight the fact that our percentage is so low and there is an impact of that.
Okay. So then this slide is our estimated revenues for the 2022-2023 school year. On my monthly financial report, I usually break down just the general fund, but I am including all funds in this. So you can see that real estate is the biggest chunk. And then locally, there's income tax, and then we have other local. And then we get 22% of our funding from the state foundation. And then there's some other little stuff. And permanent improvement gets 1%. Our debt bond retirement is 3% of our revenues. 1% of our revenues come from state grants, and 6% of our revenues come from federal grants. Are there any questions?
Children's Fields News. I wanted to know on this commercial industrial percentage of 9.27%, does that factor in the recent closing of the Meyer site?
No. No, I mean, if you're saying like recent within the past couple weeks, no, this goes back to actually the previous tax year's values, so that would not be in there.
Are they responsible or is that Millworks?
I don't understand you.
So, oh yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say.
Okay, so that makes up our estimated revenues. If you go on, I'll show our expenses. So our general fund, I want to point out, is 85% of our expenses. The majority of that, 52%, is in salaries, 19% is in fringe benefits. And our other biggest chunk is purchase services. Sometimes that's people, sometimes that's services, sometimes it's like electricity and stuff. And then I also do have our other funds in there. Debt retirement is 2%, permanent improvement only makes up 1%, food service is 2%, and then state grants you'll see are 1%, and federal grant is 5% of our expenses. Are there any questions?
Is this, looks like there's very little that you spend either on equipment or building. Am I missing something?
No. So there's the capital outlay, which is part of the general fund. That is for capital. It's only 1% of the total budget. It is bigger just within the general fund. And then the permanent improvement is 1%, which you saw permanent improvement, we get $150,000 a year currently. So, yeah. And then
Bond retirement for the issue 22 years ago.
yeah, so that is paying for a capital improvement, but it's a relatively old capital improvement.
So first of all, I wanted to apologize. I was listening in. My plane landed 10 till. So I got to hear the presentation. I really appreciate that Jacob and Terry, you guys looked at apparently that Beaver Creek snapshot, because one of our goals here, and I heard the framing that Kevin started with, is to try to think more broadly about how we shape a community that is going to meet all the needs of our residents. So I like that kind of thinking, and I noticed that the township did some creative thinking as well, and I assume that Josue did also. I haven't seen that presentation yet, but looking forward to it. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is I really appreciate that emphasis on some of the restrictions that the schools have in terms of just how your levies are pegged to a certain amount. So I think that's exactly part of what we're trying to accomplish here. So thank you.
I will say, you didn't pick out on the two levies coming up in 25. We had them staggered, so there were two separate levies, and I was on those levy committees, and we made a conscious decision to cut one short so that they ended together. And the goal of that is to have one that replaces it, or is at the same time, so that not a constant coming back. So again, that confusion that we generate in the public by continuing to come back as the millage rates decrease, we felt it'd be really important to put out there that it's not every 2 years, we're trying to make it longer. So that's why one was 8 and one was 10 years. They're expiring in 25, so we can have them end and start at the same time. Kind of combine those two from here on out.
Great. Okay. And by the way, while we hate to see EnviroFlight go, we knew that was happening for a long time. But the good news is Cresco is bumping up jobs, so we're not going to see a total loss there. So yeah.
And it'll be exciting to see new tenants move into that space too.
So I have one question about the levies, which I assume that they don't account for inflation, so that if the levy is a certain amount at the beginning one, by the 10th year, the value, the actual value will be less.
Thank you
Because of
for
inflation.
describing the struggle with
Yes.
school finance in Ohio.
Yeah, I suppose I would say they do account for inflation, but it lowers
Yes.
the effective tax rate so that the dollar amount. So yes, schools do not get the inflation growth that happens everywhere else.
Which is different than if it's like income taxes.
Yes, income tax is a lot more fluid and grows with the economy.
That's one of the reasons why the school adopted the income tax back in the early aughts.
And
Yeah, Doug.
just to add an obvious, what we're focusing on is levies that need to be voted on. There are other permanent levies which are reflected in your pie chart, but not in the
Correct.
listing of what's pending.
Correct.
Well, I think that might be a good segue to the township.
How about that? I originally thought we had set this up that we'd speak from a lectern for no particular reason, but my magic clicker apparently is right there. And as long as I'm already here, I might as well use the opportunity to, one, again, welcome everybody, and two, just give you a very brief, I don't have a laser, but overview of township demographics, geographics, and operation. This is Miami Township. We go up to Clark County, we go over to Bath Township, somewhere around before you get to the Twin Towers area is where the line goes. South to Xenia Township, which before GO's station, but a little after the southern beautiful border of the village. And as far east is Cedarville Township, and with this funny little designation, I don't know how they ever came to that, but these people are so happy to be in Miami Township. Roughly, it's 25 square miles. That's how all townships were set out before the state of Ohio became the state of Ohio. There were big townships back then, but there were also smaller townships, which were the 25 square mile. That's about the size we are. Demographically, outside of municipal borders of the Yellow Springs and Clifton, I think we run around 1,700 people, and then in the village, of course, we're at 38, 39. That's my seat. I don't see any click moving here. There we go. Township personnel. I'm going to just read a couple of these, and then I'm going to, oops. No, I'm not.
I made it large.
Oh, thank you. We have 4 elected officials, 3 boards of trustees, members, and 1 fiscal officer. We currently have 2 full-time road and cemetery employees, 1 part-time zoning inspector. Mr. Zoff, you want to take a bow? There he is. We have roughly 25 fire and rescue employees, 5 full-time, 8 non-full-time, 6 part-time, which is confusing, 5 active volunteers and 1 volunteer position director. I think this is where I want to go, yeah. So the township provides roughly 5 sets of services. Roads, cemeteries, fire, and emergency service, which is far and away our largest, and rural zoning. Mr. Zoff takes care of that. Briefly, our roads get generated funds from inside millage, unvoted tax millage that was set a bazillion years ago by the state of Ohio. And additionally, the road department receives money that's generated by revenue that comes from the sale of gasoline. It's the old 1/3 of a third of a third of a penny that we get from that. We also get a $5 per license plate outside of the municipal borders, $5 per license plate. We also get a permissive use plate, which is for larger vehicles contribute to that. These are relatively small numbers. We're talking about 5,000 for one, 10,000 for another. Inside millage generates about 60,000 for the road, and about 80,000+ for the gasoline tax. For that, we maintain just a hair under 15 miles of roads in the township. We're responsible for keeping the roads clear, keeping the roads passable. That is, if we have to either fill potholes or we have to resurface a particular road with either chip and seal or some type of blacktop, that's our responsibility. And I think we do a really good job with that, personally. And we also need to maintain the road's appearances and drivability. That would be keeping the berms of the roads trimmed down and mowed. And in a rural type environment, we have to be cognizant of equipment that's on the roads, mainly farm equipment. Big farm equipment, like big, huge combines and those things that look like spiders that you could drive underneath. And they have all these little things. Those things are high. So when they're driving from field to field or from field to farm, a lot of times they will use township roads. And so we try and maintain a minimum height clearance that's set by the state. It's like 15 feet above, and then along the sides of the roads, we'll push those back with power trimmers. And the two personnel who work for the township maintaining those roads also are the personnel who work for the township administering and maintaining, to a certain extent, our cemeteries. We have roughly 5 different cemeteries if you break them down into sections. We have Clifton Union Cemetery, which we share with Greene Township in Clark County. It is an actual Union cemetery. It's not owned by one township or the other. It's owned by the 3-person committee who oversees its operation and maintenance and funding. Excuse me. And then we have Glen Forest, of course, in the village. We have Glen Forest West, which is the older cemetery. We have Glen Forest East, which is the one across from Route 68, which is becoming more and more used. We then have 2 natural burial cemeteries. We have a natural burial cemetery behind Glen Forest East, which is a prairie cemetery. There are no full headstones, and it will hold roughly 130 graves. We are at about 50 now, perhaps 35 to 40, which are occupied and are used, and then another 15 to 20, which are for future use. One of the newest cemetery sections that we have is behind that. It's called the Oak Grove Cemetery. Oak Grove, it's also a natural burial cemetery. It was designed and laid out that there are going to be 70 places where a person could be buried, and after a period of 12 months, and this would be a natural burial, this would be no casket, this would be no vault, this would be no non-biodegradable material underneath the ground. After a year of settling, then there would be a fairly decent, not a sapling, like a 2 to 3 inch, probably not 3-inch trunk of a white oak tree. And there will be 70 spaces available. And so there will be 7 across and 10 down. And these will be permanent for hundreds of years. We hope that this cemetery will stand. Interspersed among the white oaks will be also natural burial graves. There'll be roughly 1,000 of those that will be available. So we are going to have plenty of space for the future needs of Miami Township. When we came into the business of owning these cemeteries in Yellow Springs, it was thought that there was very, very, very little space available in that cemetery. That's why the one across the street was being put to use. Subsequently, through the use of ground penetrating radar and other things, we have found that there is a fair amount of space in the western side of the cemetery. I'm sorry, I'm getting too far ahead. Anyway, those are funded by general funds or monies that are derived from the sale of graves and or the opening and closing of graves. There's no, other than tax funds from the general fund, which at the present, since we've began that, we're not using general fund money, tax money for the cemeteries. They are self-sufficient, including Clifton.
Is this the responsibility of all townships to have places? Or did we come upon that responsibility?
Any cemetery that's been abandoned from a church or whatever,
Becomes the township.
required that the township.
It's required that it goes to the political subdivision in which it's located. If it was located within the total of the village of Yellow Springs would have been required to keep it and operate it and maintain it. This one in particular, it was basically split 60-40, 75-25 with the additional cemeteries across the street. And at the time we met and negotiated, there wasn't any negotiation to it, with the village, and we felt it was best that we just went ahead and did the whole, because we had experience with cemeteries in Clifton, and again, the majority of it was either in Miami Township or would have been as it opened up. Then we have responsibility for rural zoning, unincorporated areas of the township. This is the traditional, how many residences per acres, what the setbacks, the different types of buildings. We're not going to give Richard the next hour to explain all of township zoning. So if you wanted to know that, we'd have to give it to him. He does a very good job. And Dave Chappelle likes him. That's it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. There is one portion of the township that we haven't spoke of, and that is the fire department and the EMS squad. And fortunately, we have our fire chief with us this evening, and he's going to make a presentation on that.
All right.
Chief Altman,
Thank you.
here's your clicker.
Well, there is a lectern.
I feel like we're in an arena.
Oh, there you go. I like that.
Let's not stand up. All right, so, okay. So I'm Colin Allman, I'm the fire chief for Miami Township, which includes Yellow Springs and Clifton. So I'm going to talk about fire rescue. It's the largest service that the township provides by far. We are primarily at this point a paid staff fire department. Our estimate for this year's payroll is $896,000 and some change. Keep that number in mind because it's going to come up in just a second. And we're projected to do 1,200 calls this year. That's a breakdown between fire and emergency medical service. About 80% of what we do is emergency medical service. We put people in ambulances and professionally treat them and take them to the hospital. It happened years ago, but it happens now. And what has happened to us is the same thing that's happened to many, many, many fire departments throughout the country. Volunteers have dried up. Someone's got to provide the service. Townships are required to provide fire service when needed. There is no requirement for emergency medical service in the state of Ohio, believe it or not. But we do it because people get sick a lot and need to go to the hospital. So we have had our staffing needs outpace our levy income. Luckily, the Township General Fund has been able to supplement this. But that money is drying up. So our funding comes from our operating levy. We have a 3.6 mil operating levy that's over 20 years old. I can't remember exactly how old it is, but been there for a while. And it brings in approximately $570,000 per year. Remember that 896,000 payroll. And this was designed when we were a volunteer fire department. We had a full-time assistant chief and a part-time fire chief and 60 volunteers back then. So that was designed for a place that had no real staffing costs. In 2008, the township implemented ambulance transport billing. We were the last township in Greene County, the last fire department in Greene County to do that. We held off for a long time until we were convinced you're not getting that money back from your health insurance company. They're not giving you a refund on your ambulance transport. So we go for it using soft billing so no one has to pay the copay. And that brings in about $115,000 a year. We are very fortunate in this township that we have a very high insurance rate. So we have, our billing company loves us. We have the highest collection rate of any department they work with, so that's great. But it can only be used for EMS related functions. So we can't buy a fire truck with billing. It's got to be an ambulance or ambulance staff. We also get grants, fees, and contracts. Grants are limited for fire departments, particularly in Ohio. I was at a seminar recently where the director of public safety was telling us this year, fire and EMS will get $62 million in grant funding from the state of Ohio, and law enforcement is going to receive about $15 billion. So there's a little bit of a problem there, we think, but cops have guns, so they win usually. And we have our 30-year fire station construction levy that is currently in place that built this facility. So the new levy, elephant in the room. We're going on the ballot in November for a new levy. Why? Because we have $896,000 in staffing costs and only $570,000, $700,000 in income. So we're right at the edge. We're at the cliff, hoping not to fall off. This new levy, 3.5 mil levy, will generate approximately $670,000 a year. And will cost $122.50 per year per 100,000 value. We are fully cognizant, obviously, that this is an expensive place in which to live. But we have to provide the service because we do not have volunteers in it. The number of volunteers has been dropping dramatically since the 70s. But this is a statewide and national trend. Why? Increased run volumes. When the fire department gets above 500 calls a year, it's considered to be outpacing the ability of volunteers to respond. We're at that. We've been at that for a long time. Increased expectations. It was easy to be a firefighter in the 70s and early 80s because you didn't do emergency medical services. In Yellow Springs, EMS was covered by the funeral home until the early 80s. And that's not done anymore, thank goodness. The hearse came to pick you up. Never alive. But now we have emergency medical services, which takes up most of our time. We do fire prevention, we do education, we do CPR classes. So there's a lot of stuff that makes it difficult to do on a volunteer basis. Legislative mandates have increased training substantially. When I went through fire class back in 1986, it was 36 hours of training. Got a guy in class right now who's finishing his 178 hours. That's mandated by the state, which is a good thing. We want people to be safe, obviously, but it's harder to leave your family for that amount of time. And then families. People have much more time wrapped up in their families now than 20 years ago. I'm amazed by how much parents do with their kids now. So hats off to them. I'm wearing one, but if I had one, hats off to you. This is just a chart from our Fire Chiefs Association. So it just basically shows as your service demands increase, you start to switch from a volunteer model to a paid model. The X's denote everything that we've tried so far. All volunteer, we went to duty shifts, we went to paid on call, we went to a part-time staff model, and now we're in a combination model. So as Mr. Reacher said, we've got full-time staff, both pension and non-pension. So what's the difference? The non-pension people don't do 37.5 hours a week. If you hit 37.5 hours a week on average, you got to be in the state pension. Those guys all work 36 hours a week, so they don't get the pension. We have part-time staff, pure part-time staff who work 12 to 24 hours a week, and then we have 5 volunteers. They're wonderful. They do a heck of a job, but we have 5. So here you see as our incidents have gone up, our volunteers have dried up substantially. There is a little weird dip in the incidents in 2020, and that was when COVID hit and nobody wanted to call 911 because they didn't want to go to the hospital. So every fire department in the United States basically saw a precipitous drop in emergency medical calls, and now it's starting to come back up again. But our volunteers have dropped. Big effect that big effect on our volunteer numbers drying up was the closure of the old Antioch College. We used to benefit. I mean, I was an Antioch volunteer myself. There's one too. We, as a fire department, used to get 10 to 20 kids a year to volunteer for us. Now we have 1. So you know that's had a big effect on us as well. Certain other things, the closing of Renee Labs years ago. Renee used to provide us with tons of volunteers who they'd allow to lead work during the day. They went away. Publishing did the same thing. They dried up and went away. YSI did prior to being Xylem. And Morris, well, no one ever really did this. You're melting metal. You can't really leave metal there. Yes.
Can you say something about why you believe there's an increase in
One of the big driving, that's a good question. One of the big driving factors for that is our community age. The average age in the state of Ohio is, I think, 33 or 34. The average age in Yellow Springs is 54. As people age, they tend to need emergency medical services more. That, coupled with the tremendous number of visitors we receive. We do see a lot of patients who come from out of town. Who come from out of town to have a medical emergency, I guess. So those are the 2 big drivers. Because our population isn't ballooning, that's for sure. So it's just getting
Amy, back to school board. I would imagine that the demographics might also have an effect on your ability to get volunteers. I mean, because you mentioned Antioch College, the demographics of the village was also younger than.
Yeah, if we go, if you go 4 miles over to Cedarville Township Volunteer Fire Department, they do about half the number of calls we do a year. He's got 2 full-time people and 30 plus volunteers. The vast majority of them are Cedarville University students. So when Christmas time comes and they all go home, he has 2 full-time guys and like 6 volunteers left. I mean, that's the benefit, and that's an outlier. But that's the benefit of having a 4,000 student Baptist university where they're required to do mission work and emergency medical service and fire council. Unfortunately, we don't have that. No one knows what Baptist University is looking for a place. We'll take them. So the bottom line for us is this new levy is needed to maintain our current level of service. In order to respond to emergencies in a safe and efficient manner, we had to add paid staff. It was a slow process over 25 years, but we've got to the point where we are now because we got to provide the service. Failure of our levy in November is going to result basically in the layoff of staff. We haven't figured out the numbers yet, but we're going to have to lay off staff in order to afford to function because we're bleeding the general fund dry. I guess it's a fair way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's unrealistic. One of the things, as the president of the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association, I travel around the state and I visit fire departments all the time. One of the things that I hear a lot from fire departments is no one says, call the volunteer police department. Nobody says, where's the volunteer public works? But because of tradition and history, everyone thinks of a volunteer fire department, and we remember it with this gauzy view and how wonderful it was. And it was. It was. But now we need to be able to provide services 1,200 to 1,300 times a year with staff who are going to answer the call quickly. Because as wonderful a community as this is, when someone dials 911, they want an ambulance there in 5 minutes, not 25. So that's what we're up against, unfortunately. So wish we weren't at that point, but we are. So questions? Yes.
Yes, my name is Luisa Biuri Rios. I'm with the Yellow Springs School Board. So I had a question here about these operating levies. You discussed one that is the 3.6 mils, that's, you said, about over 20 years old. Has this levy expired, or is this continuing on? And then the new levy is 3.5 mils.
They will both be on at the same time. I mean, in collecting, I should say.
So when you were putting up the numbers of the current staffing, around 800-something thousand, this older one is bringing in 570,000, and then the new one would bring in 670,000. So you're expecting some increase in staffing as well?
Not necessarily increasing staffing, but as we've had to shift all our money into staffing, we've neglected capital expenditures. So we have a fire engine that is in need of replacement. We have an ambulance that is in desperate need of replacement. New ambulance is $350,000. New fire engine, you're looking at close to $800,000. So unfortunately, those things have all been put off and they're way past their lifetime. 10 to 12 sets of firefighter gear, that's past its mandated lifetime because it's $4,000 a set. So we've got to play catch up with this money. But we don't foresee adding, other than replace someone who leaves, adding more. We're also committed to continue to do our best to get volunteers. The township has spent about $5,000 in the last 4 years on recruiting campaigns, direct mailing to people's homes, twice to every house in Yellow Springs, Miami Township, and even actually Bath Township. And those campaigns netted us 2 people, so which were great, and they're both gone.
We think of it as the fire department, but in reality, it's an emergency medical department.
Yeah, we are by far emergency medical, like most fire departments in the United States. If you look at the largest one in the country, New York City, they went to 400,000 fire calls last year, which is a lot. But they did 2 million ambulance calls. So the name fire department is still just the traditional name. But we are definitely an emergency medical service agency.
So Colin, in terms of volunteer recruitment, has there been outreach to Cresco?
Not specifically.
Okay, simply because, one of the, I guess, aspects of them coming into the community was 40 hours a quarter per employee, volunteer hours. So might be good to set up a meeting and see if that's a possibility.
We had one volunteer from Cresco 2 years ago. We may have had, I mean, it's hard to know that, but I'm not sure.
But yeah, it's certainly something we're happy to explore.
Okay.
I mean, something to keep in mind too for volunteers, we want everyone to be a firefighter and an emergency medical technician, whenever possible. So you're looking at a 3-month fire class, a 4-month EMT class, and then 36 hours a month on schedule. So it's a big commitment, and a lot of people want to do it, but they walk in and they're like, oh, I thought it was just the first aid class, and that's unfortunately not the way to do it.
Do you know what the millage rate and when the expiration is for the 30-year for the construction bond issue?
How do you know that?
27 years.
I think
it passed in 17, right? So it's probably, we started collecting in 18 or started collecting in 17.
What did it say? Letting you say it.
Okay. The millage rate for this building is 1.5 from 2017 to 2046. I'll make a copy. This is all our termed levies,
And
not our permanent levies.
very briefly, the 2046 was a date that was picked by the county auditor, and that was based on what he felt was the best scenario of borrowing money 2-3 years ago, whatever it was, borrowing $6 million, whatever we needed to borrow, and then paying it back at the current rate of interest. His numbers were generated on a current rate of interest of 5.8%. At the time, it didn't seem too far off. Fortunately, we fell into a deal with the United States Department of Agriculture, who knew the Department of Agriculture funded fire departments. And who knew that the Department of Agriculture would fund a fixed rate of 3% for 30 years for $6 million for a fire department. Not me, but we jumped on it. So as a result, either those end years, there's two scenarios, and I'm not the auditor. It will either end early because we're generating so much money, so much more than we need to make the payment every 6 months that, I mean, we can't spend it on anything else, but it just keeps accruing. Right now, I think there's about $650,000 that we're just not using. The auditor will make the decision whether to cut the rate of millage to balance out what's being collected, or to end the period early. And it's estimated that it would be, if it was that scenario, it'd be about 11 years. We would be able to quit collecting 11 years early than what we started with.
Great.
We were happy with
So
that.
it'll be paid off in 19 years. It's already there, right?
Yes.
Look out there.
Is there any benefit on paying it early? Over the US
No.
loan?
No.
There's no benefit.
No.
You're paying the full interest of the loan for the 30 years.
Yeah, Josue, I think we brought that up, but I believe the answer that I received from the USDA was, where in the world are you going to get that kind of money to pay it off early?
No, what I'm thinking is, because we looked into refinancing a water plant.
Mm-hmm.
When the economy downturn happened, during the early part of the pandemic, we were looking at interest rates of 1%. So we looked at refinancing our water plant.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that we had was that we could get a new loan for 1% and pay off our water plant, but there was no economic savings for us because the way the loan was structured, we would pay the full interest of that loan ahead of time. So there's no incentive for us to pay it early, even if we could borrow cheaper money. The interest payments are already baked into the.
Yeah, I understand that system, and that may be where we are. I'm just not 100% sure. 1% would look good right about now.
It looked great to me at
Yeah.
the time. Yeah, it was going to cost us more in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good discussion. I think we should probably move into the council presentation.
I did have one quick
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
question,
Yes,
because you
ma'am.
mentioned gas tax.
Uh-huh.
I would imagine that's something that might have to think about replacing that revenue in a few years if.
It's certainly possible. Fortunately, with the current administration in the state of Ohio, that gas tax was, if you recall, that was increased, but 11 cents or 13 cents when the administration first came into office. So our portion of that went from roughly $50,000 a year to roughly $110,000 a year. So we're getting more than we're spending. So we're able to save some of that money for future projects, more equipment, capital equipment. But we certainly understand that gas tax money may go back down to a certain extent, but
Just using less gas.
Well, I mean, if we get the conversion in the next 15 years, like they're planning, I mean, that's kind of long-term planning. We can move on.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Colin. Josue.
All right.
Thank you.
Might need to play a little catch up.
How many do we have?
We're good. I mean, honestly, I think what we're doing right now is the key goal of today's meeting. So, and I like that we've also integrated questions because we had kind of thought about separating those two. So I think it's going great.
As I start off my presentation, I want to put it in the context of what the other two entities are putting their property tax and income tax in perspective. We're all drawing from the same pool of taxpayers, income taxpayers. I want to put ours in perspective, that our property tax levy went in place in 2006. And like all of the other property tax levies, they haven't been adjusted for inflation. So we're operating on 2006 dollars. Also want to put in perspective that our property tax is 8.4 mils. And thank you, Don, for circulating this sheet, because it also highlights what our effective millage rate is. You'll see our effective millage rate is significantly lower than the 8.4 that our residents have already. So, what services do we provide? We provide public safety, which are our police department, and I'm with Colin on this. I think our fire and rescue should not be volunteer staff. I think the level of professionalism that we require them, just that we require police officers high, and that merits pay and it merits good paying. These are two job sectors that it's difficult to recruit. Fire department, police department, they're really struggling to get people to work in these industries, let alone the quality of them. We also provide parks and recreation services. That includes the pool, Don Bryan said, fields, parks. There are many other things that we do out of our parks and recreation department. If you recall, when the schools had to go on remote services because of the pandemic, we opened our facilities and had our own learning program because the demand was so high. We needed to meet the demand of the residents. So we do more than just the pool and the physical facilities. We also do programming, parks and rec, roads and streets. We just repaved 3 sections of the road this week, and it's looking great. So that's coming out of the roads and streets. We have public works, that's infrastructure and utilities, and I'm putting asterisks on utilities because utilities are funded by the individual municipal enterprise fund. However, there are infrastructure needs of those utilities need that the fees that we collect for utilities is not enough to deal with the deferred maintenance that we have in this village. I'll make a short political comment on our utilities. They were in the past price for politics, which meant very little got done. There's infrastructure needs that just went unattended, just deferred. We're playing catch up. If you did not tune in the last council meeting, I encourage you to go watch it. Johnny had a good segment on the conditions of our utility infrastructure. Other things we do with our general fund is economic development. Brian mentioned Cresco and the work that we've done with Cresco. We work with Cresco. We doubled down on our partnership and the result of that is a $48 million investment in our community. That's going to more than double the jobs in our community and expand that facility. We are starting to see the fruits of that labor, and that is reflected in our income taxes. The school's income taxes has gone up, and so has and that's making up for shortfalls that we had during the pandemic. Just in the pandemic, when our downtown businesses closed, we took a hit of over $200,000 in 2020. I don't know if the schools experienced that. But we also do economic development with our general fund. We do community development, housing development. I think you saw one go down, not happening. I think that's hurt us then. It's hurting us now as we look at the DEC development that's going to Planning Commission in October, and it'll go to council at the end of October, beginning of November. Yeah, not okay.
What did you? I didn't catch what you said. You're talking about
the kidney farm,
right?
Farm. That's going to Planning Commission, and then it'll go to council. But I want to reiterate Terry's point. We are dipping in the same pot, and we need to expand that pot. We need more residents, more properties to share the burden with. The schools do not benefit from new construction, but the village does. So that's a key distinction between our levies.
But if we time it right, we can do, what is it?
It depends.
Yes, there's a lot of things that we would need to work out for if we time it right when the levy goes in to get the benefits of new construction down the road.
Yeah, so that's one of these communications that would be really helpful.
Yes, and the challenge that we see now is that, we with this new developer, we haven't been able to build the relationship we built with the previous one, where there was a lot of mutual goals that we were looking to accomplish. We're now limited to some of the politics of the previous rezoning, and so we have less negotiating power now. Building department services. We added services to the government, and we now have our own building department. That move, yes, we have our own building department, permitting process.
Right.
That was essential to our economic development strategy, because we had businesses that wanted to do business in Yellow Springs. They want to expand their businesses. But the building department at the county level was so bureaucratic, so much red tape, that it made it nearly impossible for folks to launch a new business, particularly creative businesses that require multi-use space. We saw that it was essential to bring our own building department in-house. And we did, and we've seen the benefits of that. You'll see that the radio station, we've been able to get through the permitting process for the radio station, the comedy club, Emporium, Peaches, Cresco, so many businesses. The veganry, yes. Claudia thanks us almost every time she sees us for facilitating that service. Any question on this? There's many more things that we do these are the high level.
Can the villagers expect more motion in terms of new businesses? Because we've had a little bit of time, significant turnover, right?
In businesses?
Like downtown.
Downtown, I wouldn't say that turnover is the right word. We've had businesses leave and properties get acquired that we haven't seen much progress in, but that isn't because businesses don't want to come in, or I think there are other forces at play there. What I hear from the business community is folks are eager to get into Yellow Springs, just space does not become available often. And when it does, it changes hands quietly, and it isn't available to the general masses. So I think folks are eager to come to Yellow Springs, but we need to build that space. I'll make a plug in for a future project that we'll have. We talked internally about the railroad lot. This is the parking lot at Dayton and Railroad Street. That property has been, a vision around the development of that site has existed for a long time. I think in one, Laura Curlis was involved in one initial design of that site. We're working to bring that to fruition, expand commercial space, professional office space, and potentially residential space in the downtown. And we're in a better position to do that now because we have so much greater capacity, economic development, housing, and our own building department. So we have better resources now than we've ever had to be able to lead such projects.
But I think the answer to your initial question is also yes. And for anyone that follows the Dayton Business Journal, for example, we've been working hard to promote that Yellow Springs is open for business. And we had a couple meetings and a couple more that are like great fit kinds of businesses for our community. So we're doing a lot of work in that regard.
All right, here are funding sources. We're primarily funded by income taxes. Income taxes make 47% of our general fund revenues, property taxes 29%, and the various other sources. That includes gas tax, transient guest lodging, local government distribution. All those other items make up 24%. This is based on a $3,877,000 budget. So we're heavily relying on income tax and property taxes. These are our expenses, significant by department and by category, is in line with what you're seeing from the other organizations. Where we're spending our money, personnel services. It's almost 50% of our expenses. In the general fund, there's a large percentage of transfers, 33%, and that's a transfer going primarily to the streets, parks, and recreation departments. And those departments are heavily, the expenses, heavy on the personnel side. So while you see a big transfer here, we're putting money in parks and recreation and streets, and that's personnel. In the general fund, by department, public safety is the single largest expense, followed by transfers, and this transfers corresponds to this piece here. Then we have administration at 10%. Part of my wages come out of here, and public works, zoning, a few administrative personnel are covered here.
Public works staff is included in
A
this?
portion of Johnny's time is here. And part of Johnny's time is spent on, there's legislation piece that he weighs on, such as zoning regulations, matters that come before planning commission that have to get utility approval. There's strategic planning, infrastructure planning, so there's a small percentage of that time.
How do your revenue ratios compare to other communities? You mentioned we got 47% property, 29%. Is that kind of on par with other municipalities?
On par in comparison, when you weighed, we're a bit of an apples and oranges comparison based on the level of services we provide. There are very few municipalities that provide such a comprehensive suite of services. So if you're looking at just by millage, we're comparable on the lower end of some of the municipalities. When you compare us to the services that we provide, I don't think there's very many entities that provide the level of services we provide.
Sorry, Jessica Thomas, Yellow Springs News. So I know, like, as far as services, we are apples and oranges. I guess what I would like to see is a comparison to another community like the school board did, Yellow Springs, property from, money from income taxes versus property taxes compared to another municipality. They compare to Beaver Creek. How does that compare for Yellow Springs?
Yeah. And well, let me jump in because I think you were at the meeting where we talked about Oakwood. And one of the things we know is that Oakwood buries a lot of their utility expenses in property tax. And that's why it's sometimes hard to compare. And so I think we are going to get some of those numbers. I certainly want to see them as well.
Yeah, and Brian meant what Brian's referencing in the Oakwood, and we recently had a cost of living presentation at the council meeting. I encourage you to watch that. There's really good comparison in terms of cost by municipalities. So when you look at our income tax, we're at 1.5%. That's low compared to Xenia, Fairborn, Dayton. Obviously, Dayton's much bigger. But there are communities that are similar to us that have a 2.5% income tax. We have 1.5%. On the millage rate, again, it's a bit of apples and oranges comparison, but we are not higher than our peer group.
Build on that. One of the pieces of paper I passed out was just for Greene County, not Oakwood or Centerville or whatever. The total within the village is in the middle range for the county. But in the cost of living study, the comparison to sort of similar sized communities that have been chosen over a 30-year period, again, at property tax, Yellow Springs was sort of in the middle, but when you add both the school income tax and municipal income tax, we were the highest tax. But that doesn't refer to Oakwood or Centerville. So it also depends on which segment of our town you're in terms of your property ownership, of your income level. Just talk about median this and median that doesn't give the full picture.
Correct, and I think and also comparing our community to other communities, I hate to say this, but there isn't a fair comparison, because when you look at the quality of services that all the 3 different entities provide, we're at a different level than a lot of communities. You can compare us to Xenia, and you look at our fire department, look at our police department, our schools. I think that we are at a different level in the quality of service that we provide. All right, challenges. What are the pressing challenges ahead? Brian and I constantly have conversations about cost-saving measures, cost management. Gosh, I feel like we've exhausted all cost savings measures. How we've done that, you look at the improvements we made on our infrastructures. We've improved our sanitary flow, our water losses. We're now working on our electric. Cost saving and cost management has been top of our priority list for a long time. What that allows us to do was no utility increases since I've been here. Since I've been here, there's only been one utility change that was already passed by council before I arrived, and that was on electric. But no water increases, no sewer rate increase. We do have some unfunded mandates. I think you might have heard that there's a group that's very interested in seeing sidewalk improvements. They've been organizing volunteer groups. Well, with that comes additional pressure to grind and repair sidewalks. Parks, we have a body of water that's in bad shape, and the only way to fix it, I think, is dredging it to the tune of $250,000. Infrastructure. We've been lucky to get significant grant money to improve our infrastructures, but just a couple weeks ago, we got a report on camera and examinations of sanitary sewers, and we are worse than we thought we will be this year in terms of bad sanitary sewers. So we got major infrastructure. Add hyperinflation, supply chain issues to that. Our chemicals to treat our water at the water plant are costing us more. Just everything that we buy costs us more. Our transformers, all supplies, you name it. I think the fire department is no exception to that too. We're in a tough labor market. Difficult to find people. You find someone commands higher wages and deferred maintenance. What are the opportunities? Implement a stormwater district. We did that. Thank you, council. I think that's going to raise 100,000 much needed funds to address stormwater issues. But there are other opportunities, and we're bringing this up because I think none of these should be secret, that we look at these and discuss them and look for ways to improve our position. Those include adjusting the reciprocal tax, making an equitable income tax, raising utility fees, launching new services, broadband internet service. This is one of the partnerships that Judith highlighted earlier. We wouldn't be able to build out the pilot project, the broadband pilot project, without the help and support of the schools. And that we need to expand on that, because not only does that, there's multiple benefits of broadband. One, we would have a better connected community. Two, we will provide access to a larger marketplace for our residents. The future jobs, as you're seeing it now, a lot of folks are working from home. That's not going away. There are companies that are just not opening up their headquarters or office space. Adjust planning and zoning fees, consider street levy to fund road improvements, consider park levies to fund pool and park improvements, complete repairs of sidewalks and shift future repairs to property owners. These are the opportunities. This is a scenario in which what revenue opportunities would be are present in reciprocal tax. Right now, we provide 100% credit to residents who pay taxes outside of the village. So if there's a resident that lives in Xenia and they pay the Xenia taxes, they're not paying anything to the village. Many of our residents are working in Dane, Columbus. So those folks those two cities have a larger income tax than the village does. They're at a 2.5%. We're at 1.5%. So they pay their income tax in those municipalities. We don't collect any income tax from those residents. And that's an example of where our revenue opportunities are.
I'll say one other thing. We don't collect income tax from retired people. They may have other income, but it's, investments, but it's not taxed as income tax. So in an aging community with an increasing retired population, that does not bode well for that source of revenue.
Correct.
Louisa, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I mean, with all due respect, just about that utility rate increases, that there haven't been any since you've been here, Josue, and I respect that, and I think that's an important point. I do think when you look at the past 10 years, and I'm not really aware of exactly what year that, you know, the Village of Yellow Springs struggled with the decision to increase the utility rates by quite a bit. And I think many of the households in Yellow Springs are still adjusting to some of those increases. And that was one of the pieces in the cost of living report with the McKee comparisons to other communities comparable to our size of what, for example, we pay for our water infrastructure of those utilities in comparison to other villages. I do think it's significant, so I just don't want to overlook that, that particular piece.
And I think that's really good because that report also breaks down, you know, in terms of electric, we're very competitive, even with our going to be 100% renewable portfolio before too long. But certainly the new water plant has meant significantly higher rates for water. So good point. I feel like I want to move us into the next part of the agenda. And certainly, yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I have a couple things to point out. So we got a couple sheets here, and this one here that has the voted, I think these are the expiring levies that, a piece of paper that the township handed out. The voted and the commercial effective rates are incorrect on this sheet for the emergencies and the bonds. So please reference our PowerPoint for the voted on those, and I can get the commercial rates.
If you get the accurate rates, I'll send out.
You can just mark your paper.
Okay.
So in voted, it's 1.2, 7.33, 6.32, and 2.1.
Yeah.
I just don't want anyone to leave here and say, well, the school said this, but the township had a paper that said this.
Yeah.
I just want us all to have the same information.
So the voted amounts, would you read those again?
1.2 for the permanent improvements. 7.33 for the first emergency, 6.32 for the second emergency, and 2.1 for the bond.
And then the commercial rates are different from the residential. I do not have those with me right now. And then something that Josue talked about with the jobs at Cresco, school income tax and city income tax function differently. School income tax is based on where you live 100% of the time. So you have to live within the school district to pay school income tax. So if somebody does get one of those new jobs and they don't live within the school district, that is not new income tax for us. And then city income taxes, there's a different function there where a lot of them offer the trade. So you pay taxes where you work and where you live, and sometimes where you live does forgiveness, like Yellow Springs, and sometimes they don't. So it does depend, but city income taxes are where you live and where you work, whereas school income tax is 100% where you live only. I could talk for an hour or more about all the different property taxes and how income taxes work, but I've already done this. It was our February special school board meeting. So if you do want more information, it's so much fun. We had a lot of attendance there. I talk about school taxes and property taxes in general for an hour or more with the board. And that was our February special board meeting, not the regular meeting, but the second meeting of the month, the special meeting. There's a video recording of it. There's lots of great information there about property taxes and school district income taxes.
Thank you, Jay, for that clarification. And I'll keep my clarifying points on our millage simple. They're much less than the 8.4 that have been voted on. And these are subject to change annually. Council accepted the effective millage rates a couple weeks ago when we got it from the county auditor. So we've accepted those millage rates for 2023.
So I think what I'd like to do is make sure that whatever documents we do make available for the public are vetted by the key finance folks. And we'll make a spot on the village website where those can live. And maybe the other entities want to do that as well. But I think there's a lot of great detail here. And I guess as we transition into opportunities to collaborate and coordinate, I just want to say I really appreciate that we've all gotten together and the authenticity and candor of this discussion. It's long overdue, and it's something that the community has certainly wanted to see. And this is kind of beyond my expectations, so in a great way. And so I really appreciate what everyone's done, and I think there are a lot of opportunities. And I know that several folks here have started to think about things around collaboration and coordination. Judith highlighted some of the great things that the schools in the village have done together. Of course, Chris and Don and Marilyn know that we're also working on the Yellow Springs Clifton Connector with the township and the village. So there are great precedents for collaborating. And, I do want to make a pitch on the coordination side for making sure that our liaisons are formalized by all the bodies, and that we have more of a regular reporting scheme, less ad hoc. And I think in the future, we can talk more about what that looks like. But, for example, I think Amy was saying, right, like we should be communicating if there are timing opportunities that benefit all of us in terms of restructuring levies or whatever. So I do want to make sure that's happening. But love to hear what other folks are thinking about. Don?
Well, just a couple other examples of collaboration. In the schools, use village parks for some athletic. The village owns the library building. The libraries aren't part of what we've got in this room, but that building, built largely through donated money, there have been talk, this is like late 1950s, about the library and the schools sharing space, and have decided not to do that. So in the long run, it's been a greater expense because there wasn't that collaboration. Used to be the Opera House, which had township offices, performance space, and I don't know what other common uses. So historically, there's precedent for capital expense sharing.
Okay.
And the proposal that we didn't follow up on of the schools using part of the Antioch property is another exploration in the same vein.
All right. Yeah, Terry.
So I think, I don't want to spend time talking about the schools Antioch thing, because there was a reason why it stalled, which is not this conversation. I think, I appreciate this opportunity, and I think, Josue referenced the key cost of living report, which we've read thoroughly. And I think, if you know me, I'm going to ask the hard questions. Marianne made a wonderful comment about the fact that when you have retirees, their income is not taxed, and when you count on income tax, that can be problematic. So this is not a division between the ages. This, I think, should be an opportunity to step back and look at things differently. When I read the McKee report, I see that, yes, Don, we do have higher expenses, but we also, without a doubt, have whether you like the median or not, it's a good indicator when you're doing comparisons. We have the highest median income. We have the highest property values. Now, doesn't mean to say everyone is wealthy and everyone can afford to live here. But it is a piece of information that we should step back and look at and say, okay, How do we make this work? If we provide such valuable services, and I firmly believe we do, we have to figure out together how to make this work. We can't have schools that have aging facilities with a thriving business and a thriving village. They don't go together. So I think this is my challenge to myself and to all of us. How do we step back and think about this differently instead of kind of sometimes it becomes exhausting instead of just resigning ourselves to the fact that our path is set and this is who we're going to become. Because it doesn't have to be that way. So maybe this is the start of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we caretake children, and children have futures, and I think everybody in this room supports that, and this village has been about that for a long time.
Yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that, Terry, because I know we've been in conversations where we've talked about how do we do this, right? And how do we talk about it, and how do we inform properly? So I'd like to think that this is a good jump start as well. Marianne, yes. Yes, go ahead, Jose.
Sorry. If you, when you're speaking, if you can speak into your mics as much as you can. We have, all of our followers, not all, but some are complaining about sound, so.
You got to be a loud talker like me. All right, Marianne.
So yeah, Marianne McQueen, Village Council. So I think that this meeting right here is we're saying we want to step out of our silos, which we have sort of been in, ironically, in this very small community. And so I think that we need to start looking at, can we have shared facilities? I mean, we're meeting right here, for example. Can we have shared staff? I was talking to Leslie, who's HR for the schools. So if I bring up something, people might go, oh God, no, we're not going to do that. But we, the village, I mean, maybe we could have shared HR. Could our fire and EMT and police join as they do in Oakwood, for example? Are there ways that we might look at that service, that emergency medical service? Do we need to look at that differently? Are there materials that we can share? Are there other resources? I mean, I think we need to start looking at where we might be able to overlap all of these things and save resources and benefit by that collaboration.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd actually like to know, this is a meeting I'm seeing about emergent. I think I see Terry Cohen.
Medicaid 1, medical advance care, 635 Axel Drive. Medicaid 1,
can you cut the mic?
medical advance care, 635 Axel Drive.
I didn't want to.
I see 5 members of the Yellow Springs Community Development Corporation, or at least in some capacity on the meetings. And so what I'm confused about with this, with all due respect, is if you are working collectively, why is YSBC not utilized more in this conversation?
I think I've said it a million times, so I'll reiterate that when Marianne and I worked on getting the DC started in a different way than community resources, so a designated community improvement corporation, which meant that you had to have 40% at least elected officials. A main goal was the coordination around the taxing entities. I guess it's harder for me to speak about how the Yellow Springs Development Corporation kind of took a different direction. But I think the bottom line is we realize it's important, and that's why we're meeting, and I think we'll meet again. But that ended up not being the place for these conversations to happen. So I don't know if that's a perfect answer, but that was the intent. And so we're approaching it in a different way.
Well, and I was going to say, I think that when YSDC was being developed, that idea of YSDC was came to council, because I was on council at the time, I was not actually very comfortable with that being the body, because because that means the individuals who are from the council, the school board, the township, I mean, for them to be able to represent the view of that board, that elected body, then they need to kind of have that conversation with the elected body first. Otherwise, they're just kind of coming with their own individual perspectives. And so for me, it's better to actually have the elected bodies together, so that, you know, you've actually got the authority to think about these issues as, you know, for it. It's hard for those individuals to really represent those boards and have that authority. So I think it just works better to actually have the full elected folks in one room.
Well, I think that's a great point, because, you know, we were very intentional about wanting everybody who was available from the elected bodies to be able to meet. And so, yeah, thanks for highlighting that.
Because I think I'm coming from a perspective of having worked with community development corporations as part of some of the jobs I did in Philadelphia. They function very differently from the one here in Yellow Springs, and some of the things that they are able to do are exactly what you guys are talking about. So that's
Thank you. Don?
Competing with the emergency medical.
We'll pull your microphone closer. Yeah. That'll help.
Thank you. And Chris may have more accurate memory about this, but I remember reading in the paper before I was a trustee, there was a period when the township and village council, this did not include school board from what I read, scheduled in the months where there was a fifth Monday joint meetings, but then they found there wasn't enough talk about or something like that, and just ended up not doing it. But we could return to that, just pencil in on the calendars in those months. It's roughly 4 a year, although it's not strictly that, with a fifth Monday, plan a joint meeting, and if for some reason you think there's no need for it, then don't have it. But that would be just from an arbitrary calendar point of view, an approach.
Mm-hmm.
There is some background to the YSDC. We do have a tax committee. Myself, Josue, and Terry, but Josue and Terry don't represent in the same way. They don't speak as a board member. But YSDC is not laying down that committee at the moment.
One of the things that I think that YSCC is one role that that it can assist and provide information for meetings like this is that it's not just these organizations, but also the Community Foundation, Antioch College, well, of course,
the chamber.
Right, exactly. And it's really informative to, I know, myself and Don and Dorothy and Josue about activities that are happening in and around the village. And it helps me as a government, as a state official to know where the motion is happening in town. It gives me confidence in what we're trying to accomplish, right? So we're working hard on facilities, and it's wonderful to have conversations with President Fernandez, for instance, and listening to the conversations that they're having on campus, knowing that, you know, we have common interest in, say, a performance space, for example. The pilot project that has been discussed here with the village, between the schools, for instance, right, is that the community foundation was one of what I think was the first non-government entity to be involved in the pilot program. And I know that Jean-Marie Cox gave a wonderful testimony about that experience, right? And in fact, you know, provided recommendations. I hope I hope people will go back and review the minutes from that particular meeting, because I found that. I'm very excited, and I'm very excited to hear the results of that pilot program as that new utility comes online in the village. So we're seeing motion, especially coming out of the pandemic. We're seeing motion in the village. We're seeing economic development motion, and we're trying to get a feeling. We've been dedicating ourselves to getting a feeling for what type of, say, economic development in the village, whether it's high-density housing or job growth in the village, will help us on these with our revenue, right? And you can see that, I mean, the school's interest in a high density, from our discussion today, in a high density housing is probably greater than job growth, unless that job growth has direct correlations to people who live in the village, right? So we're building our knowledge base through Development Corporation, but it really I mean, a forum like this, one, it helps inform the public, but it also helps us as government officials really rise to the moment as we're working together, as the community adds in additional assets to help us, you know, grow and further our development and modernize.
Judith?
One thing I would like us to be thinking about is this whole issue of shared services. Given inflation, given just, you know, already there's an affordability issue, challenge in the community, because, you know, housing is, particularly because housing is so expensive here. And I think that sharing of resources and trying to look for opportunities around sharing resources is something we owe our community. You know, a lot of people are already struggling to try to stay in the community, and we want to be able to make things as affordable as possible. I think that's our responsibility. So I thought of two questions that we might want to be thinking about. One, what do we maybe have to offer to you guys, you know, as a school? I'm not sure what that is. But you know, thinking about that question, you thinking about maybe you could help us with this, sort of, so as to start to think about the places where we might be able to help each other out. And I know, Josue, when we were just recently thinking about at our school board meetings, you know, when the architect was going over his drawings and we realized the drawings can't be seen by the people watching the meeting. And Josue and Terry got together to kind of think about that. Josue, you know, is offering to help us, you know, potentially with audiovisual. Maybe we have our meetings at the village council meeting. I mean, that's something we're thinking about. But, you know, just also just so ways that perhaps our staff can help each other. I'm just thinking those are the kind of questions to ask. I don't know what the answers are, but just the willingness to be thinking about that we can be so we can support each other, we can help each other, and try to identify what the ways that we can.
Great. Terry?
Yeah, I'll mention this again. I know I've mentioned it before. David Glassner, who is the superintendent of Shaker Heights, they have last year, they were starting this, I'm going to say collaborative partnership, because the library was going to build a new building, the school district was going to build a new building, and so they worked, it was the village of Shaker Heights, the library system, and the school system. They stopped and they said, maybe we can do this differently and together. So I haven't seen David in a while, so I can't give you an update, but I do know they were trying to do some of this, just as an example.
Great. The one opportunity that I know of the library system, now, I can't speak for Carl Blum, but I know that one of the things that he's looking to do is to find maker spaces within different communities. Beaver Creek's probably in line first, but boy, would I love to get Yellow Springs up in the line of where they establish maker spaces. I think that, we have just an incredible amount of, the readership, that the book borrowing that we have out of our library is just phenomenal. We're above national average and state average. It's great. And I think that if we could establish a maker space in town with the library, that would be a wonderful opportunity. But of course, that's something to work out with the executive staff of the library.
Louisa?
Yeah, again, Lisa Beery-Rios from Yellow Springs School Board. I just want to speak plainly as, a steward of our school system, because I just would like it to be clear tonight that one of the areas in which we are currently engaged, as folks know, but I just wanted to be clear, is around conversations with our facilities. And I want to make it clear to the public and the villagers and everybody here that we have a timely need to provide safe, accessible, healthy environments for our children in Yellow Springs and our educators to learn and to teach here. And we are in a place in our facilities conversation in which that need has only become greater. And I just, again, want to speak very plainly to folks to let you all know that that continues to be one of the top priorities as the folks that are stewarding the work of the school system in the village of Yellow Springs. That this has been deferred for many, many years. And we are at a place now in which the priorities are so great that we are evaluating even the basic safety needs in our schools. And I just think it's important for folks to know that before we leave tonight, that that is one of the most important priorities that we are currently facing in our district.
Thank you.
I'd like to, Kevin Stokes, Village Council. So definitely want to second or third at this point, some of the points that Mary Ann made about shared services. And I think if we all just, to Terry's point, just start thinking differently, just like starting right now. Don't buy an ink pen tomorrow without thinking about whether you can borrow an ink pen from another tax agency. Now that was, a little tongue-in-cheek example, but I think, Colin, when you were talking about grants, comparing to how the police departments get much more than the fire departments in the state, I know we, the village, could use more help with grant writing. I noticed that the school's amount of income from grants from the state seemed to be low. I don't know if just having either a dedicated individual or group makes that. So it's just a thought. Doesn't have to be, the right thing. With respect to just a couple of notes and thoughts, worker housing. And when I hear the term worker housing, I think about sort of like service industry. But I wonder if Cresco and DDC could come together and say, for example, right now, all those high-paid folks that will be working at Cresco, there'll be a mix of where their income taxes go, perhaps. So, think just. Would Cresco be willing to kick in a few bucks and maybe change the planning process for what DDC is thinking about at the time? Had a conversation with someone, and some of you have probably heard this, what Marianne mentioned, that we've got a great deal, a large number of folks here in the village who have wealth, but who aren't paying taxes, some of whom, given the opportunity, would donate to some of these needs. I'm not one of them. But if I were retired and just had, non-tax income, I would love to give a little something. And I think if we can figure out a way to legally do that and just give folks the opportunity, because I do know individuals who have said they would give more, but they're not obligated to right now, so they don't. So I think if we all just sort of remove the barriers, remove the us versus them. I mean, we all really ought to be one team. We all have the same thing at stake, so call this, just give us a new name. It doesn't matter, but we are the movers and shakers, and we can do anything we want in this village within the law. So again, just, if I were to use the phrase outside the box, that's an overused phrase, but there should be no limits on the possibilities of what we can at least consider. And so I just want to throw those few things out, and I've been trying to sort of listen most of the time, but we can do great things. I think if we just—
Kevin, I think we can, I agree. 2 points for those listening. Our low grant number can be directly attributed to our wealth. I don't know how else to say that. Whether it's a grant for other educational things or a grant from the OFCC for facilities. This is why we qualified for 26%. I'm not dismissing that 26%. It was a lot of money for a new K-12. That's why we only qualified for that when other districts were qualifying for 75% and 85% and 95% for buildings of the same age. It is our wealth. So we love donations in Yellow Springs schools, but as I can thank my parents for raising me as they did. When you live in this type of society, you're responsible. And so how are we responsible for our children, ourselves, each other? Again, but I want to clarify that grant piece. It's our wealth that gets in the way.
And I appreciate that. And so, so we should flip that on its head. Where is all this wealth? I mean, I know it
is in income and property wealth.
Because I do want to appreciate the efforts by the village council and the village to look at housing in the village. I think it's an interesting point in the Yellow Springs schools in our slides, in which we're showing that about 1/3 of our staff lives within our district. I believe that number would be higher if they could. We do not have a lot of housing stock, even of all types, including affordable housing, but of all types of housing stock. And it does impact us in so many ways. So as we look at other businesses and Cresco and where people are going to live, I would just say, please keep in mind our educators. Please keep in mind our service people, our firemen and our police officers, and what are the people who are directly contributing to these services that are our well-being, that are our quality of life. Where are they able to live? And all of the efforts that you all have been making towards housing, I think, are appreciated.
This is maybe a question for the township, and I'm sorry to.
Well, actually, yeah, I probably will jump in because we've got about 5 minutes left. What's it?
Yeah, we're getting close and we should go.
Yeah, so, but I don't think we don't have to go in depth on next steps. So what I do want to say, though, is that, in line with creative thinking, I do want to highlight the Universal Basic Income Initiative, which has been pitched as a great way to prevent people from being priced out of the village. So I think we've talked about a lot of great stuff. I'm getting the sense that there's general consensus that a next meeting would make sense. And I like Don's idea about, maybe we do look at fifth Mondays. Other thoughts about what we should be thinking about with next steps?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think that we've come up with some at least general suggestions on things that we could do together. I think it's difficult for all of us together to work through all those things. So we may want to create some task teams, people will come together from the three entities to sort of brainstorm, here are the ways that have been suggested, sort of further develop some of the ideas rather than wait for 3 months or 4 months or whatever it is to come back together.
Well, Brian, I was gonna say, Brian and I are the liaisons, and I don't know if we're the two, and then I don't know who your liaison is. If Marilyn, we talked to Marilyn because she's new and she's looking for ways to get really involved in things. But maybe that's
Could we confirm when each of our bodies meets in its next business meeting, who is our liaison, and we expect that team of 3 to plan the next meeting. Perhaps you said there's another fifth Monday next month.
You've already booked it.
Already booked it, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that would be great if we could confirm that. And I think, to underscore the idea that the liaison should be responsible for representing the entire body and, having those discussions and bringing it back rather than, just a couple people, and their own ideas. So, yeah, I think that would be great. Other thoughts? And I do like to, even though I don't do it with our meetings, I do like to keep us on time with these other ones. Yeah, Amy?
Well, I would love to invite the library into this conversation because I know that there's some things that they're working on. They haven't necessarily been brought into the conversation at the Development Corporation, but there's some resources that they may be.
Well, I don't want to wear too many hats, but I serve on the Council Library Commission and I'm on the Greene County Library Board. So I mean, I can represent the library.
Follow up on that.
If they feel great about that, I think that it would be nice to bring that in.
Carl probably wouldn't mind showing up in another meeting.
And then I think what I would also like is it'd be great to have, Terry and Jacob and Josue and, just some of the finance people in the mix too, when we're having some of these discussions. Because I think we've got to drill down on some of these issues as well. And I've heard some really great ideas, so.
And your idea about the grant and seeing if we can get a group of folks together who'd be interested in organizing something about that. Yes, 100 times, yes.
Cool. All right. Any final thoughts? I will say the goal had been more citizen participation. We will definitely expand that part in the next meeting. So, but I hope anyone that does have feedback talks to whoever they know and trust and are relevant.
They're very active on social media right now.
Oh, yes. Good.
Oh, really?
All right. I have no doubt. That's where it all plays out. All right. Well,
Yes,
right.
I do need a motion from.
Yes, we all have to. So, okay.
I make a motion that the school board adjourn.
Second. All right. Jerry Rios?
Yes.
Hempling?
Yes.
Magnus?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
We're adjourned at 8:59.
Okay. And
I move that village council be adjourned.
all right, I'll second.
Aye.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Or do we need to roll call?
We don't. We
Okay.
can roll call.
Okay.
You guys need to do anything?
We are adjourned by acclamation.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Can't wait to read the Facebook comments. All right. And have a great evening.